publicly control over Saudi Arabia to Donald J. Trump. And how do you know this? Because they publicly held the sword dance ritual, which is a very, very big deal to the Muslim culture. And only the king holds the sword. And during this festival, of which, we've got the images here, who's holding the sword, who's at the center, who's at the very center at the top of the podium, and who everyone else is around in support of. Donald Trump is holding the sword. He is at the center of the stage. This is Saudi Arabia publicly capitulating. And in one of the photos that we have, it shows the Saudi king, and he looks like he's about to die. He's in so much pain at what's going on here. And that's it. Because was very fresh for them. They just handed over the keys to Saudi Arabia to Donald J. Trump. And that happened in the summer of 2017. That's step number one. After the declassify of this documentation via the NSA, this was step number one. Saudi was the big player that they needed to get on side. So what is important to note is that where Trump went next, he went with Saudi as part of his team. So you need to understand, it's not just that he didn't go there and take them down and that they're never going to do it. No, they're now working for him. They're earning credits towards their own safe salvation and their own not being as harshly punished as they could have been, and all the rest of this. We'll see how that all plays out. But they're part of this team. They're part of the Q plan now. You need to wrap your heads around this. And the new crown prince that replaced Al-Walid was bin Salman, and bin Salman really stepped up and became a key player and did a lot of things to help Donald Trump, and we're going to get to that. So that was step number one. Step number two. Then the days that followed, Trump left Saudi Arabia and went immediately to Israel. Okay? Do you remember how angry most of you got when you saw those pictures of Donald Trump at the Wailing Wall in Israel, and confirming all of our worst fears that he was a Zionist tool?
After the video that I put out yesterday, a few people commented in YouTube that how can you be so naive? Trump is a Zionist tool.
Yep.
He's in there with the Zionist regime of Israel and all this. That seems to be one of the main bugbears that people have with Trump, and it seems to prevent them from giving him any further credence because they just write him up as a Zionist puppet.
Right, and folks, let me burst your bubbles here a little bit. This whole thing with Israel being the linchpin and being the real kings behind this, and that these Zionists, none of it's even real. You're just going to see it's all fakery, it's all subterfuge. There is no such thing, and sorry, this is going to probably offend some people, but there is no such thing as a genetic Jew. There are lots of Hungarians and Poles and Czechs and Germans and Jews are just like us. They come from all over the place. But there's no genetic race called the Jew. Israel is Colleen calls it the ultimate Trojan horse. It is subterfuge. It is designed to take you down a rabbit hole, and there's no getting out of this rabbit hole because none of this really exists. Okay,
just like they're playing the black card right now.
Yes,
they like to play the Jew card.
They play the Jew card. So they invented all of this with Jews, and then the bad Jews, Zions, and I just feel terrible for all these people that have been dragged into this, that are innocent, beautiful people that truly see themselves as Jews, and that they're oppressed and they're hated by everyone, and now they're just being used by the Phoenicians. He's not a puppet for the Zionists. There are no Zionists. Remember, folks, there's just the Phoenicians. There's just those 13 families, and they're very smart, and they're very good. And they created this ultimate Trojan horse subterfuge of the Jew being a literal creation, just like you're going to hate this, but Jesus Christ being an actual, Swiss-looking white dude in the Holy Land 2,000 years ago, that didn't happen. They're just lies everywhere. So Trump went to Israel and he sat down with everybody in front of the camera and behind the cameras, the people that are really in power, and he laid it all out on these minions. I'm talking to you, he said, not who you tried to present yourself to be to everybody else, but I'm talking to you, minion, Netanyahu, and everybody else who is a child eater. This is for you, and you have a choice to make here. And Trump they were balking at him, even though he showed that the Saudis had signed over, and the Israelis were balking at Trump and were not prepared to sign over, and that's why Trump stayed an extra day. And they finally capitulated, and Trump was not going to leave Israel without them capitulating to him. And the sort of the how do you know moment is after visiting the Wailing Wall, Israel publicly submitted allowing the United States to move their embassy to Jerusalem, Jerusalem, LEM. To move the embassy to Jerusalem with the Americans' military protection. So this is symbolic. It is a symbolic act to show who has the power, even in the Holy Land, with the Jews and with these Zionists who are in charge of the sacred truth about the Jewish heritage and tradition. That's why it was done. It was only done for one reason, just to be a symbolic act to show those who had eyes to see it that Trump had now taken down Israel. They submitted. Step number 2 of the journey completed. Saudi Arabia, Israel on board. So where would he go next? Who are the 3 big players? Saudi, Israel, and then the Vatican. So days later, he shows up at the Vatican and he presents to Pope Francis a massive, apparently the folder was absolutely huge, and handed it over to them and said, take your time, have a look-see, and put your red shoes on. They were apparently Trump kept making little digs at Pope Francis about his red shoes. Yeah, you might want to put your red shoes on when you look at all of this stuff, and you might want to wear your red shoes when you come back and give me your answer. So that's what Trump is saying. I'm not leaving here until you sign some documents for me. And we're going to get to why that was in a sec. But it took the Vatican that night, and the next day they capitulated to Donald Trump. And there is a very famous photo in that summer of 2017 with Trump at Vatican City, right next to Pope Francis. Pope Francis looks like he's been run over by about 60 semi-trucks. Donald Trump has a look on his face that is a mixture of victory, joy, and mischievousness. Like he knows he's committed a big act here. So Trump has a massive grin on his face, and Pope Francis looks like he's had both of his eyes punched in by about 60 thugs. He looks so horrific. And they symbolically signed off. Now, what did the Vatican have to do to sign off? You see, the Fed is controlled by a certain group within the Catholic Church. Who went forth and spread the teachings of Christianity? The Jesuits, because they're holy men. No. The Jesuits are the real mafia, my friends. Every little group of mafia in every single town around or across this vast earth, every little mafia pays homage to this particular group in the Catholic Church. They are in charge. They are the true mafia, and they were in control of the Fed. So Trump did not leave until Pope Francis issued a papal bull announcing that by a certain date, the Vatican Bank, which was in charge of was the head executor, the exchequer of all of the earthwide Federal Reserve banking systems in each country, would be handed over to one Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is not, Mark, just the executor, the exchequer of the U.S. Treasury and therefore the Fed within the United States. He is the exchequer for Earth. He is the exchequer for the treasuries for every single country on Earth. That's what I told you earlier. No human being in history has ever been more powerful, owned more things, or richer than Donald Trump.
Charlie, let me ask you where this leaves the Rothschilds, because this is what we hear about the Rothschild family. They are said to be in control of the central banks in every country around the world. So where are they left in all this?
Brilliant question. Because at this meeting, that just cut the legs off at the knees of the Rothschilds in London. So London was the financial arm of all of this. Washington was the military arm. Rome was the central brain, the core. They call it the spirit, but it's not. It's sort of the central brain of this unholy trinity of power. And what they did by doing this is that, so Trump's thinking is like the CIA, the Rothschilds, and the financial district of the city of London is too evil. It's too far gone. Don't even want to work with them. And he's not. He circumvented them. Like the crucifixion in the human physiology, you can't get through Atlas, the 33rd vertebrae, so you have to go up and around. Trump went up and around the Rothschilds, who are really a nasty, evil piece of work. So the city of London in the summer of 2017 had and I'm talking about the real city of London owned by ultimately the Phoenicians, but ruled by the Rothschilds. They had their legs cut off at the knees, and they have not been a real player ever since. Ever since, Mark, they have not been a real player. All of their power was cut off, and they have been forced to do some really humbling things over the last 18 months, in particular, by POTUS. So, you want to know about the Rothschilds? They're just still looking for their legs from the knees down. So that was step number 3, and so now you see the 3 main arms, or the 3 main, geometrical pillars of the pyramid, this evil, unholy pyramid, have now all been controlled. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Vatican and that's where his first 3 stops. Now, when Trump left Rome, he flew directly to Brussels, and you all know the 2 big players that are in Brussels. You have this European Parliamentary for the EU, and then you also have NATO that just happens to be in Brussels as well. And Trump called the meeting. They were all there, all of the political heads, along with their finance ministers. And then all of the behind the scenes individual players were all there for this. And Trump apparently very famously he called everyone together for this meeting, and then he purposely came late, and he made them just sweat it out. He made these pieces of dung in Brussels sweat it out because they didn't know quite what to think and what was coming. So Trump makes them wait. He walks in late. He throws this big folder on the table, and he said, "We have it all. We have it all. What's your answer?" That's what he did. And he played just incredible hardball with the EU and NATO. And in short order, those little rats, those little cowards, they all capitulated in very, very short order. And there was a whole bunch of things that occurred in the following days from there, including the EU backing down on Brexit, and NATO having to, step up and basically pay for the bulk, and all of these different nations instead of the United States having to fund all of them. It's not like that's